What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with yet again another week 4 prediction video. As always, I got Ty here joining me this week to break it down. But before we talk about this week, we got to talk about last week. And both of us going 4-2 last week in our locks of the week. I had USF covering. Yeah, that didn't come even close. And that Texas A&M Notre Dame under was over by I think halfway through the second quarter is what it felt like. But other than that, everything else hit for me as I'm somehow, some way staying above that 500 line for betting.
Yeah, it said I was going to right the ship. Started it last week going 4-2. Bet on Billy Napier. That was my only mistake. Not sure why I thought that was a good idea. Thought maybe his guys would fight for him with his seat being very, very hot. But other than that, pretty solid week.
All right, then we will talk about the week 3 picks as well. And you can see here, both of us going 8-4, so decent week for us. And this came down to upsets. We had 6 different picks in this one, and we both went 3-3 in those 6 games. So that's why you find us here at 8-4. And of those 6 games that we picked different, what's your biggest takeaway from those? Because I'm going with the Miami and Vanderbilt. I'm going with those
Mhm.
two guys because Vanderbilt goes on the road and pretty much did whatever they want after Lenore Sellers got hurt. This game was over. Pavia took over. And then Miami and Carson Beck. He looks like a top 3 quarterback, if not top 2 or even possibly 1 at this point in the season.
I'm going with Georgia. I know that's kind of boring, but Georgia is Georgia. I think a lot of people were on Tennessee last week. I would not have been surprised going into that if they won that game. But Gunnar Stockton proved that Georgia's not missing a beat here at quarterback this year. Everyone was really concerned about his throwing abilities, and that throw he made on fourth down in the fourth quarter was an absolute dime, and he showed that this is not just going to be a run first team that they can beat you through the air as well. So I think Georgia has kind of reasserted themselves as the top dog, no pun intended, in the SEC at the moment until someone can take them down.
And then here we will talk about something new before we really get into conference play here. And Ty, I'll let you have the floor here as we predict kind of where we see this, Power Four conferences ending at the end of the year.
Yeah, as I'll start with the ACC. I don't really know how you can have it any other way here than these four. And I think the order is pretty solidified at the moment. You could maybe flip Georgia Tech with Florida State, but I just think Georgia Tech's got to prove it a little bit more. And Clemson, could they beat Georgia Tech and Florida State on a neutral field? Maybe, but I'm tired of giving Clemson the benefit of the doubt because they're starting to lose that at the moment. Already off to a 1-2 start. So that's how I have them in the ACC right now. Big Ten, really tough to rank Penn State. They're ranked 2 in the country. I have them 3 in the Big Ten. They had the worst non-conference schedule I've ever seen. Um, I mean, I guess took care of business, but I mean, what can you really analyze about them so far? And Oregon is just destroying teams, so you got to put them at 2. But Ohio State at 1 with the top 10 win on their resume. And I've been impressed with USC again, another team who hasn't really played anybody, but that offense has been humming. They already have a 70-point game this year, so I'm putting them in the top 4. And unfortunately, leaving out, I believe, number 9 in the country, Illinois, not even in my top 4 in the Big Ten. For the Big 12, I'm buying into Texas Tech this year. I know that's usually a mistake, but I'm high on them. I got them at number 1 in the Big 12, followed by Utah, who is right back where they used to be. They took a year off with all the Cam Rising injury drama. They're right back in the thick of it. And then I got undefeated Iowa State at number 3, and then Baylor with Sawyer Robertson, maybe the best quarterback in the country through 3 weeks. I got them sneaking into the top 4, even with a loss. And then the SEC, like I said, top dog right now is Georgia until someone proves otherwise. And then I got LSU at number 2, pretty self-explanatory. The Vols at 3, because even though they lost that game, they showed that they are right there with the top teams in the conference. And then Texas barely holding on to that number 4 spot with a struggling Arch Manning.
And I'm kind of going the same way with you in the ACC. Got Miami at top. Like you said, you could flip Georgia Tech and Florida State, and that's what I did here. I'm just a little biased coming off that Haynes King performance. and they should just
Dog.
wrap him in bubble wrap because if they wrap him in bubble wrap, that's their best chance to win this year. Make sure he does not get hurt. Then I'll jump to the Big Ten. Yeah, it's a little different than yours. I got Oregon at the top. I got Michigan at 2 because if we can get that Bryce Underwood in a big game, what we saw last week against Central Michigan, even if it's not 100 yards, we're talking maybe 40, 50 yards just to keep the defense on their toes. That just opens up the playbook and expands Michigan's offense a ton. And I can like that in a big game because Michigan really hasn't had that versatile quarterback, I guess you could say. Because McCarthy, yeah, he would scramble, but it wasn't really for a big run because he never really did that. So Michigan could really use that out of the backfield, especially with their good running game already. Ohio State at 3. Obviously, putting Michigan over Ohio State, meaning I'm taking Michigan to beat Ohio State yet again. And then at 4, I have Illinois, that team you were talking about. Luke Altmaier, I think he's going to be a great quarterback, and this is the weekend to prove it against Indiana and really assert himself as a Heisman favorite. Now, jumping to the Big 12, I got 3 of the 4 same teams here, except I'm leaving out oil money in Texas Tech. I think that somehow, some way, I think they could even be in a 3-way tie for 3rd place with Texas Tech and they finish 5th in the Big 12. But I just don't have them finishing because I think what Sonny Dykes and TCU is doing over there is very under the radar
Mm.
this year. And don't be surprised if they even get up even higher, or it could be last year's Arizona State. Just no one really talks about them. Somehow, some way, they find their way in the Big 12 championship game. But I like Utah to win the Big 12 with Devin Dampier. That team is just clicking on all cylinders this early. And in the Big 12, when you have a team that's doing that, they kind of run the table. And then the SEC, I think it's the biggest crapshoot we've ever seen in SEC football. And I'm going with A&M and Missouri. And I'm doing that because you just got to look at the schedule because all 3 of Georgia, Tennessee, and Bama, I guess you can throw Ole Miss in there, Florida, but they're pretty much a dumpster fire already. LSU, all these teams have huge schedules where they all play each other. And it is probably could be the first year where you have a 2-loss or 3-loss SEC team in the conference championship, if that's the case. But I don't think that's going to happen because I think A&M and Missouri come out a little unscathed. I think maybe with 1 loss, possibly 2 at worst. And that's kind of where I see it standing right now. But that could easily change in Georgia, like you said, just could absolutely run the table here.
I would even throw in, I had Texas A&M as my 5th best team in the SEC, and you have them at number 1, and I can't even really argue with it. I think that just shows how wide open that conference is this year.
Yeah, I'm just high on Marcel Reed. Obviously, if he only completed 17 passes for almost 400 yards. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously he's doing something right. But we'll
he's the
jump
real
into
deal.
this week and we'll talk about our locks. I got Utah at home against Texas Tech. There as why I'm not having Texas Tech in my top 4. Michigan on the road at Nebraska. I like them to cover because if they're going to win, I think they win by a field goal or more. Tulane plus 12.5 at Mississippi. Mississippi's had 2 tough SEC games against some weaker opponents in the SEC. And I think Tulane's going to give them another run for their money. Mizzou, I think they destroy South Carolina because Lenore Sellers is already out in this one. And Bo Perbula, the transfer from Penn State, is playing out of this world right now at home. It just looks great for them. Illinois plus 5.5 on the road at Indiana. I think that one's going to come down to a last second kick. And then Michigan State 18.5 on the road at USC. I know USC and Lincoln Riley have been playing some really good football and not getting enough credit for what they're doing, but same can be said about Michigan State and Jonathan Smith and Aiden Childs. And I think if somehow, some way you can make it to stay up to watch this pretty good game on the East Coast, I don't think you'll be disappointed.
All right, I'm throwing in some games that a lot of people probably don't have their eye on this week, but I got Rutgers plus 2.5 against Iowa this week on a Friday night. Iowa is still Iowa. They filter in a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback. They're still the same Iowa. If you've watched them for 3 weeks this year, it's the same offense we've been seeing for the last 5, 6 years. So I think Rutgers under Schiano could maybe have a bit of a breakout year this year, 6, 7 wins in a bowl game. I think that starts Friday night with a cover and maybe a win over Iowa. And then I got UCF minus 7.5. I don't know what there was to like about North Carolina. Absolutely ran out of their own building by TCU. And UCF with a first year head coach, just like Carolina, but a lot more momentum going for them. They have a coach that could maybe stick around for a while, not a 75-year-old coach. So I got the Knights covering that 7.5 at home. And how can you not bet on the Army, the United States Army, getting points at home? I think North Texas um, is punching above their weight a little bit. Absolutely blew out Washington State last week. I think it was 59-3, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of people are going to be hammering them, but I think that was just kind of a outlier game because they struggled with my Western Michigan Broncos, who are not good this year. So give me the Army. I'm going the other way on Indiana. I think this is their biggest home game, maybe ever. And I think that's going to be a very tough environment for Illinois. And I think Indiana um, builds off their momentum from last year, covers that one. I got Auburn at Oklahoma. I think Auburn's very underrated this year, and 7.5 is a lot of points. So I think they cover. And Duke has just not been impressive at all. So I think NC State would not be surprised if they win, but I think they cover the 3.5.
Then we will move to our first game of the week, and it is a must-win game for those Clemson Tigers. And they face a top-ranked passing attack of Syracuse, and that causes some concern here. Now the line is moved to 17.5. I'm not confident in that line because what we've seen from Clemson. Now they've played a good football game last week where they had a chance to win it. So they could easily be 2-1 here. And I still like Clemson to win this game, but eyes are going to be on this game for the wrong reasons because we got to see what Clemson is really made of here.
Yeah, I'm just not super impressed with Syracuse so far this year. Clemson, a lot of people would say Dabo's going to rip into them. They're going to be motivated coming off a loss, but we did not see that against Troy in week 2. So I don't know if it's going to be as much about that as it is about Syracuse and what they're lacking this year. So I think Clemson bounces back and gets to 2-2.
And a huge game that I don't think even I knew until I was reading this article 15 seconds ago. This is the battle for the Iron Skillet. This is started in 1915 and has been played in all but 7 years since. And TCU is the team that's going to put this on hold. It's the last year they're going to be playing this for a while. And SMU, I'm sure, is going to say, why are you doing that? Because TCU wants some easier cupcake home games. And I think SMU definitely can go in there with something to prove. But I think Sonny Dykes and that TCU team is going to put the league on notice here that they are going to win this game, limit Kevin Jennings, which has been pretty much impossible to do this year, and walk away with a victory in the last battle for the skillet.
Yeah, I agree. It's been tough to limit Jennings, but I don't think SMU is going to be limiting that TCU offense at all. I think TCU is going to have a field day similar to what Baylor did at SMU. I just think TCU's been very impressive in their first 2 games. The absolute whooping they put on North Carolina, very impressive, no matter how many issues are going on with that program. So I think getting this game at home, big rivalry, I think TCU runs away with it late.
And then the biggest game possibly of the week, depending on how you're looking at it, Texas Tech, Utah, much more than bragging rights here in this one, as whoever wins this game pretty much can run away with the Big 12 chance to win the title. And I think that's going to be Utah at home. You know, I'm surprised you're picking against Utah here because I know you put them in your playoff early on, but Utah at home, Devin Dampier's been playing great. Like you said, they've put the injury history behind them. And I love Utah here in this spot. Now it is an early kickoff for
Hmm.
Utah because
Real
it's
early.
3 hours behind, but hey, it's okay. Um, I think these guys are going to be fired up and ready to play this game.
Yeah, I was very high on Utah early in the season, picked them to win the Big 12. However, I had Utah going 12-1, and this was their one loss I had. I'm going to stick to it here. Like you said, early morning kick. So a tough place to play, but if you're going to go there, you might as well do it at 9, 10 in the morning. Not sure what time zone Utah's in, but that's definitely an ideal road atmosphere for Texas Tech. I think they take advantage. I've been very impressed with them through 3 weeks. And I think they kind of assert themselves as the top team in the Big 12.
And then obviously, we're going to be on edge for this game, Michigan, Nebraska. And, if I pick against Michigan in this one, pretty much I'm saying they should just pack it up. But like I said earlier in the video, if Bryce Young can do half of what he did last week, I think Michigan walks away with a victory. I honestly might like the over in this one as well, because I think Dylan Raiola is going to respond and show that he's going to be a very good quarterback in the Big Ten for this year and possibly next year. Uh, But, bias aside, I think if I put my bias aside, I'm probably taking Nebraska here at home because it is still a very tough place to play. And Matt Rule, third year, we all know how that goes. Bias aside, I'll take Nebraska, but for the pick standpoint in the video, obviously I'm going with the Wolverines.
Yeah, this could be a potential program-changing win for Nebraska. They've been starved for a win like this to really boost their program, who's been down for the last decade or so. I think both of these defenses are really solid. I think it comes down to what quarterback can make more plays. And, Dylan Raiola, while, leading Nebraska to a bowl win last season, definitely had his struggles and definitely had his freshman mistakes. So I think Michigan will be the more sound offense this week. Much better run game for Michigan. I think Justice Haynes can kind of aid Bryce Underwood, get him comfortable early on, and I think Michigan wins a dogfight. It's going to be right down to the wire. Both of these teams really need this game, but I think Michigan gets it on the road in a close one.
All right, and then at 3:30 as well, we have an Auburn-Oklahoma game, and you got Jackson Arnold going back to Oklahoma to possibly get revenge on his former squad here, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I think John Mateer is going to have his Heisman moment in this game, and I think he is going to break out against that Auburn team and really put it on them late. I think this could be a 38-20 kind of game for Oklahoma. I like the spread in this one, but I'm just a little cautious of it because, like I said, this still is a revenge game and you never know what can happen in those. But I like the Sooners at home. And, like I said a few videos ago, if they can beat Michigan, watch out. This Oklahoma team, I think, will get hot. And the defense showed up, and now you got a quarterback to do it. Brent Venables is sitting pretty comfortable on his seat that was a little hot coming into the year.
Well, I'm going the other way. I think that Oklahoma defense, yes, played very well against Michigan, but at the same time, Michigan stayed on page one of the playbook the entire game. They did not really have to do a whole lot to stop that Michigan offense. It was just running right into the teeth of the defense time after time. So I think their defense gets a little bit of a wake-up call this week. I think Auburn's been very underrated. That road win at Baylor is holding up very, very well through 3 weeks after they turned around and beat SMU on the road. So I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Tigers, and I think they can go in and beat Oklahoma, who is still riding very high off that Michigan win. It might be a little overhyped right now.
And then also at 3:30, hopefully you got your YouTube TV multi-quad box here going for Tulane and Ole Miss. And I'm going Ole Miss at home. I know I said I'll take the points in Tulane. I originally picked Tulane in this one, but I'm just kind of thinking, well, Ole Miss, it feels like they got to win this one to really be taken seriously. And I think they're going to do that here late. I would not be surprised if this one comes down to a 2-minute drill for either team in this one. But it is an SEC environment, and Tulane hasn't seen something like that this year. So give me Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think Tulane's the runaway Group of Five playoff team if they get this one. And I could see it. Ole Miss, I'm still not quite sure how good they really are, even with those two SEC wins. But I do think they get this win at home. I think Tulane probably covers, keeps it close, but just too tough of an environment. And the Ole Miss offense has been humming over the last 2 weeks. So I think that's going to be a little too much for that Tulane defense, and they get the win.
In a game where we thought this would be a lot more anticipation heading into this game early in the year. Like I said, Sellers is out. They're probably reeling South Carolina. I don't want to overreact, but it could get ugly very quick for South Carolina because they got Missouri, Kentucky, and then you go five straight AP poll opponents in LSU, Oklahoma, Bama, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and you still finish with Clemson. So this South Carolina team could easily go from 2-0 to a possible 2-7 just like that. And
Yikes.
the way Missouri is playing football here, I like Bo Prabula. I think they win this game. Like I said, I think they're going to cover in this one. They get UMass next week before they really dive into their big SEC schedule, but you got to start off strong here with a dominant win.
Yeah, I agree. And let's be honest, that South Carolina offense was looking pretty awful before Sellers went down. They were not moving the ball at all against Vanderbilt last week. And on the other hand, the Missouri offense has been off the charts to start the season. Obviously, lit up Kansas in that rivalry game and Bo Prabula looks like the real deal. So I think there's more of the same here. Tougher defense in South Carolina, but like I said, that South Carolina offense really had nothing to write home about before or after the injury. So I don't see them keeping up with that Mizzou offense.
Then at 7:30, you got Florida and Miami. And when your quarterback throws for 5 interceptions the week before, I already know where I'm leaning. That is going to be Miami and Carson Beck. And the line at 7.5 really thinks Vegas. Vegas must think that Florida's got something in them that nobody else in America sees. I will give them credit, though. They are going to throw the ball, and they are not going to be afraid to throw the ball, as we saw last week. Miami has, I think, a little easier of a defense to read. Because LSU's defense was out of this world. But Miami at home, they're clicking. I think they're playing better than they were with Cam Ward last year. So give me Miami.
Yeah, I could see this coming down to the wire in this game. I think Florida's defense has actually played really well this year. They're not the problem with this team. It's the coaching and it's the quarterback. And I think that's going to come back to bite them. If this is a tight game in the fourth quarter, which quarterback do I trust to make the late play more? Obviously, it's Carson Beck, given that, like you said, Lagway with 5 interceptions last week. And Carson Beck is looking like a brand new player. Obviously, had his struggles with interceptions last year, but is looking much better to start 2025. So I think he makes a few late plays in this game, and Miami wins what might be a close one.
And in the Apple Cup, give me Washington here. They're going to just destroy Washington State because Washington State doesn't even know who they're starting for their quarterback here entering this week. And that's never a good sign heading into a rivalry week. So Washington just keeps on rolling and dominating the series.
Yeah, Washington may be looking ahead to that big Ohio State game at home, but you got a rivalry game, so I don't think there's going to be too much of that. And Washington State got 50 burgered by North Texas last week. That's about all you need to know. So, yes, it's a rivalry game. They say throw out the records, but Washington is much, much better than Washington State at the moment. So, I think they dominate the Apple Cup this year.
And then on NBC, probably the best game that they've had in a while at night on NBC is Illinois and Indiana. And I must have forgot to Google Kurt Signetti because I'm going with the Fighting Illini on the road. But I like Luke Altmaier in this one. I trust him more. Um, I don't know. I just think Illinois has all these expectations to be really good this year. And I think they can do it with their schedule that is presented. I mean, they have Indiana this week, USC next, Ohio State later, and after that, I think every team is going to finish 500 on their schedule. So Illinois, they got to win at least one of these next 3 games to possibly get in. But if this is probably going to be that statement win, if they can win this game, they even might vault up into the top 5.
I think this is going to be an awesome game to watch, and that atmosphere at Memorial Stadium in Bloomington is going to be absolutely great. This is their biggest home game. I said maybe it is their biggest home game they've ever played. Last year was the first time Indiana had ever won 10 games. They'd never won 10 games in the entire history of their program. Now you got a top 10 team coming in at night. I think this is going to be a very scary atmosphere for Illinois. And people are going to know the name Fernando Mendoza after Saturday night. I think he throws for 2 or 3 touchdowns, has a big night. And I think Indiana shows that last year maybe wasn't a fluke and puts themselves on the map in the Big Ten.
Baylor at home, Sawyer Robinson outplaying what is surprisingly Arizona State's quarterback. You know, we would have thought never Sam Levitt would be even having this conversation, but double almost every stat. Sawyer Robinson already over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, 2 picks. Levitt a little over 500, 5 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And just looking at the quarterbacks in this one and where these programs are going, Baylor is going to be a very good team because we didn't think Auburn was going to be that good of a team, but here they are, shocking the world already. And that game, week 1, I think could prove pivotal down the stretch because I think Baylor's going to get this game and go on a run. Because if you were to look at their schedule, they don't have another ranked opponent until Utah on Saturday, November 15th. So Baylor can easily run the table here. And who knows, maybe in that matchup, they still only have that one out of conference loss, but they got to start this week at home against last year's champion.
Yeah, I think Sawyer Robertson is everything Sam Levitt was supposed to be this year and plenty more. He has um, maybe asserted himself as an early Heisman candidate. where Sam Levitt really, really struggled against Mississippi State. So I think Baylor is the obvious pick here. Arizona State does not have Cam Skattebo walking through that door. So if Sam Levitt struggles again, I'm not really sure where they turn to on offense. And Baylor has been humming on offense. They, I think, put up 50, if I'm not mistaken, on SMU. And I think they continue their momentum and put themselves in the top four in the Big 12.
And then the last game on our docket, we got Michigan State, USC at 11 p.m. Eastern kickoff time. And I'm going with USC because this team on offense has looked unstoppable in their first three games. I know they didn't look the best, even though still putting up 33 against Purdue. But this team is averaging 55 points a game, which is second in the nation, almost 370 yards, which is sixth in the nation. And if you looked at just the box scores and comparisons of their starters, it's not really much different. But you look as a team, this USC team should just run away with it, I think, in the fourth. I think they win by 17, but Michigan State will still cover.
11 p.m. body clock for Michigan State. I think that's all you need to hear. That is absolutely brutal. Uh, even though I can't stand them, I feel for them because we're catering to these teams who wanted to join our conference. But I do think that's going to be tough to overcome in this game. And not to mention, USC has been very impressive through three games. Aiden Childs has been much improved this year. He's not making the big mistakes that he made last year, but I still don't really see that Michigan State defense stopping a high-powered USC offense. So I think maybe this game's close deep into the third quarter, but then Michigan State won't be able to get the stops late. So I think USC runs away with it and gets the win.
And that's going to be it for week 4. Make sure you guys check back next week to see how we did. And obviously, as we break down the games next week. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.